in Lviv. Hopefully, you can see a slide that says Helios white emitting organic lighting systems, module 3, Horizon Europe project lifecycle, execution control and closing phases. So this this presentation, it's the third and final of my series about EU project management, specifically in regard to Horizon Europe. And over the next hour and 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about, firstly, the execution and control phase, and then secondly, just one or two slides about closing phase. Now, all the time I've done these presentations, I've tried to be very practical, try to share some of my experience, practical experience, and it's the same today, this afternoon. So with regard to execution and control phase, I'm going to go through kind of checklists for a kickoff meeting, say for Horizon Europe project, some ideas there. I'm going to give some recommendations about how to do regular online project meetings. I'll then go on and talk about deliverables, milestones, publications in the context of Horizon Europe. I'll say some words about knowledge management, dissemination, communication, and exploitation. And then with these Horizon Europe projects, you have periodic reviews. Typically, if it's a 3-year project, at the midterm and then at the end. These are reviews with the Commission and with some external experts. They're very important. So I go into quite some detail there, talking about things like the reporting, the Part B for these, the financial reporting, also a sort of suggestion of an agenda for a project review meeting with the Commission. I'll then say some words about budget flexibility, which from my experience, I often get asked about during Horizon Europe projects. And then lastly in this section on 1, execution and control phase, quite often you have what are called grant amendments. So I'll talk a bit about reasons why you might want to amend a grant agreement. And then I talk about the practicalities for the 2 most common examples of grant amendment in my experience. So anyway, let's get into the details. So this first part is all about execution and control phase. And yes, I said about kickoff meeting. So the kickoff meetings for any kind of project, they're obviously very important. It's a chance where you bring all the partners together, you hopefully clarify roles and responsibilities. It's certainly the same for Horizon Europe. And what I'm writing here are some things you might want to think about. So for example, during this kickoff meeting, you want to make sure that there's an overview about the project and objectives. So from the grant agreement, you want to make sure that you review the project goals, expected impacts, and key deliverables. You want to make sure that the consortium partners are aligned on the scope, timelines, and intended outcomes. Consortium roles and responsibilities. During that kickoff meeting, it's really important to clarify each partner's contributions. And I've written here in bold, it's really important that and I'm saying this from the perspective, especially as being a coordinator, you really want to see that the partners are taking ownership for their responsibilities. And so I'll link with that, of course, there's a need to clarify communication channels, clarify decision-making processes described in the consortium agreement. During that kickoff meeting, you want to go through the work packages and milestones. And here I would suggest, it seems pretty obvious, but you would want each work package leader to present their work package and the tasks. And again, I'm repeating, but it's important that that work package leader, she or he, takes ownership for their work package. They talk in detail about what should be happening. Certainly, what should be happening during the first 6 to 12 months in terms of deliverables, milestones, activities. And also during that kickoff meeting, it's important for the coordinator to sort of clarify financial administrative rules, so review the funding allocation, the eligible costs and reporting requirements, ensure there's understanding of the grant agreement and consortium agreement. Now, in the top right-hand corner, I've got this bright yellow large star, almost like a side note. And I've written here, well before the project officially starts, e.g., for example, already during the contract negotiations, remind the academic partners to recruit their PhD students, postdocs on time. So I'm really saying this from personal experience. Time and time again, I see with Horizon Europe projects is that the academic partners, for one reason or another, they fail to make sure they have their PhD students or their postdocs at the start of the project. This is often because there's internal bureaucracies, paperwork they have to do at their own university, but also it has to be said it's often because they just don't think ahead enough. Yeah, they wait too close to the start of the project or only when the project's already begun to then start moving on this important item. So yeah, if you're the coordinator and you've just won this project, I'm already, if it's me, I'm already thinking, right, start sending emails to those academic partners, start asking them explicitly, or what are you doing now, to recruit your PhDs, postdocs. Other things to think about, to cover in the kickoff meeting, the stuff like risk management, contingency planning, review list of critical risks and proposed mitigation measures which you've got documented in your grant agreement, establish a monitoring process to resolve issues. Number 7 here, it says ethics, data management and open science. So discuss if there's any ethical compliance and data protection measures you need to respect. Review open access requirements. This is especially important for any, say, journal publications, conference papers that you may be publishing based on results from the project. Communication dissemination strategy. So review the project's communication, dissemination and exploitation plan. And discuss with the partners, get them to identify really concrete activities that they can be doing during the first 6 months. It might be events, it might be social media, stuff about the project, but trying to get already some kind of action list just specific on communication dissemination. And then last point here says next steps and action points. So obviously from your meeting, summarize the key decisions and responsibilities, set dates for the next meetings, and reporting deadlines. So that's kind of a sort of checklist for a kickoff meeting, but obviously that's not going to be enough. I mean, you need to be running regular meetings. So on this slide here, I want to put forward my personal preference if I'm coordinator, and that is, I think, if I'm the actual coordinator of Horizon Europe project, I recommend personally that to have a weekly online meeting, which is held, say, on the same day, same time, and it's a chance to review the project's action item list. Now, I know a lot of scientists don't like this. They don't, but let me put forward my case for this. So I recommend it because if you have a regular weekly meeting, it becomes a habit. The partners don't need to think what day or time it is. They just know, oh, it's on Thursday at 2 o'clock or whatever. And the other thing, a key thing, is the meeting at the start of the project. You'll find the meetings may be relatively long because there's lots of new things to discuss. But after a few weeks, after a few months, you'll find the duration of the meeting will tend to go down. It might only be half an hour, maximum 1 hour in duration. But obviously be flexible. I mean, there may be some weeks where it's only 5 minutes because there's not much that needs to be discussed, or another week it might need to be an hour and a half because you've got some big event coming up. But another reason why the regularity, weekly is so important is because it helps to keep your partners focused on their tasks and actions. And regularity helps ensure the partners are made to feel accountable. I mean, what I've seen from personal experiences, if you've got this weekly meeting, say on a Friday, it's amazing how the partners suddenly get into action and address their actions on the Thursday or on the Friday morning. They feel accountable. And as a coordinator, that's what you want, yeah? Then, of course, the other thing is, if you're doing this weekly online, whether it's Teams or Zoom, they've all got some sort of AI companion, and that helps so much with writing minutes and capturing actions. And then the last thing, of course, is if you have it weekly, you can set it up in the email calendars of the consortium partners. So every, at least quarter of an hour or half an hour before the meeting, they get a kind of prompt. So really, this is the bullet points on the left. On the right of my slides, this is, say, one page from an example of a sort of action item list. So I used to have in the past a project called Fit for NMP. I was the coordinator, and in the action item list, which I'd circulate before each meeting, there would be one, possibly 2 pages for each work package. The sheet I'm showing here is just for work package 2. It was a work package called Innovation Workshops. What I'm going to explain now, it's the same for all work packages. But basically, what I did was I copied the table from the grant agreement showing the person months for each partner. The reason why I did that was I wanted to know myself, and I wanted the partners to be reminded if they had person months allocated for that work package. And in other words, were therefore somehow accountable, responsible. Then below that table, I copied the sort of table with the performance indicators for that work package. Again, I took that from the grant agreement. And so that's the middle table here. As well as showing like the second to last column where it says final target, which were the targets to reach before the end of the project, I then add an extra column saying current total. So obviously this is the idea here, is to keep people focused on what we said we're going to achieve by the end of the project, and where do we currently stand. And I had this thing where, because there's so much information in this document, I would then highlight the targets that had still not yet been achieved. I would highlight them in yellow, just so that it really captured all your senses. And then lastly, below that, it'll be a sort of table with very concrete actions that partners are supposed to be doing. And then, I mean, here you just see part of a reference. There was an innovation workshop that was being organized at VTT in Espoo, Finland in early November. And obviously the idea is here with these meetings, you go through, you update these actions, you close them out if they're finished, and so on and so forth. So that's a bit about, sort of regular meetings, a suggestion for an action item list. Moving on, of course, for these projects, when you're running them, you have deliverables, and much of the time the deliverables are reports. Even if the deliverables are some sort of demonstrator, you'll be required to upload some sort of deliverable document to the European Commission's online portal, to what's called Sigma. My suggestion here is that if you're the coordinator, create a standardized deliverable template, which for all the partners to use. If you do this, it just means that collectively you'll look more professional towards to the European Commission and to the reviewers of your project. Yeah, what you don't want is lots of very differently formatted, stylized documents for deliverables. It looks like you're a bit incoherent, yeah? So create a standardized template. Then what I do is, and it's shown here in this yellow star, I've written here, send an email reminder at least 2 to 3 months before the deliverable is due to the responsible partner. So yeah, it's about giving a nudge, giving a gentle push to whichever partner just to make sure that they haven't forgotten about the deliverable and that they're working towards getting it prepared in time. Still on the subject of deliverables, so obviously the quality of your deliverables, your reports is very important. If they aren't sufficient, the commission will reject them, or the reviewers will reject them, and you'll have to resubmit them. Obviously, to try to avoid that, it's good to have some kind of quality control process in place. And this is a simple example I'm showing you here. This was actually a Horizon 2020 project I had called CIFIS Home. And what we did right at the start of the project there was to identify the deliverables we had, the chronological order from the start of the project. This was obviously taken from the grant agreement. But what we then added was we identified other partners in the consortium, say, who weren't necessarily directly involved in the production of that deliverable, but who could do some kind of review and quality control of it. So if we just take the first example, if you look at the second row here, deliverable 7.7, CIFIS Home website, the lead partner was, so lead beneficiary for this was Sen. The deliverable was actually due by month 4. It was a public deliverable. We set an internal deadline for this of the 15th of January 2021. And then we said, well, look, these other partners, Pearl, Polito, and Riots, they need to do a review of that, and they need to give their review feedback within 1 week, so by the 22nd of January. So this is just a simple kind of thing that one can do. And I think especially if you're doing a research and innovation action, it's a very good thing to do. Still with deliverables. So let's imagine you've prepared your deliverable reports and it's been quality controlled and you, the coordinator, are all happy with it. It's time now to submit it. So the submission of these deliverables is done through the European Commission's portal, what's called Sigma, which stands for System for Grant Management. On this slide, you see a screenshot. This is from a Horizon Europe project that I'm currently involved with. It's a EIC Pathfinder project called QRC for ESP. And you see, if you look in the lower part of the screen, you see the deliverables that we've had over the course of the first year. The project started on the 1st of January 2024, and you kind of see all the deliverables that we've had since that start. So if you're involved in the Horizon Europe project, and you have access to Sigma, you'll see something similar to this. Then a last comment I want to say about deliverables. So this is slide 4 of 4. I'm going to read the bullet points on the left. So I've written here, public deliverables in Horizon Europe projects are available for download from the European Commission's Cordis project database. Now, for those of you who don't know, with all the deliverables, the reports, demonstrators, you have to specify in the grant agreement if the deliverable will be publicly accessible or whether it will be confidential. And in the vast majority of cases, the European Commission wants to see that deliverables are publicly accessible. The reason for this is they say all the money that goes to fund these projects is public money, and therefore any results coming from the project should be for the public good. So yes, most deliverables, not all, but the vast majority will be public. This is, if you're new to Horizon Europe and EU projects, this is very interesting because, of course, you can go and have a look, and it's a chance to learn how other projects write their deliverables. This can be especially helpful to understand how to produce deliverables required in all Horizon Europe projects. So, yeah, in all Horizon Europe projects, you've got things like deliverable for project website and promotion materials, data management plan, dissemination, communication, execution plan. These days, there's often an agenda plan you have to have. All those, they'll be public deliverables, pretty much. And yeah, you can access them through the European Commission's Cordis project database. For example, at the top of the middle of the screen, there's a QR code. This QR code will take you to the Cordis project database. And in fact, it will take you to a specific Horizon Europe twinning project. So you know that Helios, our project, is a twinning. There's literally hundreds of other twinning projects out there. I just picked one somewhat randomly, which has the title Twinning to Build an Industrial Ecosystem Around the Core Principles of Industry 4.0 and the Digital Twin. To be honest, the title and the specific project was kind of academic, not so important. The point I want to get across is if you go to such a page on Cordis, find a project, click on where it says results, and then before you know it, you'll see a section where it says deliverables. And lo and behold, for example, with this twinning project, amongst the deliverables, they've got things like gender equality report, data management plan, dissemination, exploitation, communication plan, and so on and so forth. And you can download these. So you can do a lot of learning. I'm sure if you do some clever sort of scraping of the web, you can get a whole mass of information on these deliverables and how to produce them. So enough about deliverables. What other key things do you have to think about during execution and control? Well, surprise, surprise, milestones is an important thing. During the course of your project, you'll have, who knows, 10, 15, maybe more milestones that you say you have to complete and are captured in the grant agreement. When you've completed a milestone, you have to record that information in Sigma, in the European Commission's online portal. This screenshot that you see here, this is again from my QRC for ESP project. And you see some, but not all, the milestones that we have. And you can see many of these milestones are linked to specific deliverables. And you can see the dates when we've completed them. There's like a calendar. And there's a simple tick box at the end to say whether or not it has been achieved. So if you're the coordinator of a Horizon Europe project, this is something you'll have to maintain and make sure, certainly at the midterm review and final review, is fully up to date. On from milestones to publications. So I'm not going to talk exhaustively about publications because you're going to be getting training in May more about dissemination, communication, and exploitation. But just to say, it's essential, and I'm reading the first bullet point, it's essential that you acknowledge Horizon Europe funding and also show the EU flag in any journal articles and conference papers that are based on research results from a Horizon Europe project. So buried in your grant agreement, there's an article 17.2. There it will say about the need for acknowledging Horizon Europe funding. What I would suggest is at the start, if you're the coordinator or the dissemination manager in such a project like this, it's good to contact the European Commission project officer just to verify what formal statement should be used to show this acknowledgement. Because, to be honest, the required wording from the Commission, it does evolve over time. With that said, currently the formal statement that can be used, certainly for Helios, you could use one of the following statements. So you could say, at the end of your journal article, say, on organic light emitting diodes, you could write in the acknowledgements, the research presented in this paper was funded by the European Union under Horizon Europe for the Helios project, grant agreement, blah, blah, blah. Or very similar words, we acknowledge the support of the European Union under Horizon Europe for the Helios project, and then the grant agreement number. The Commission is really, really keen that there are publications in journals, in conferences, and so on and so forth. And they want to know about that. So the place where you record this information, not surprisingly, is in Sigma, the European Commission's online portal. This screenshot shows the page. It shows in this top menu, there's one sort of close to the middle where it says publications. So you would click on that, and then you would need to provide the necessary details about that publication. And I should add, it's not written on this slide, but closely related to this is the Commission. It's absolutely obligatory. If you're publishing a paper in a conference or in a journal based on results from Horizon Europe, you need to make sure that a copy of that paper, that presentation, is available in an open access repository. And the details, the web link for that needs to be included in this information uploaded to Sigma. That's absolutely vital. Okay, moving away from publications to say some words about knowledge management. So I'm reading the bullet points here on the left. It's a standard deliverable. You need to prepare a data management plan according to the European Commission's template. This template that I'm referring to, the QR code that you see on towards the right-hand side, that will take you directly to that template that you have to follow. Assuming you download it in that template, you'll see that as part of your data management plan, you have to define categories of data that will be collected, generated, and used and processed during your project. And there's, I believe there's 7 such categories. So public research data, confidential research data, so on and so forth. So in your data management plan deliverable, you'll have to sort of create some tables where you say precisely, what data, if any, will be public from your project, similarly confidential, likewise deliverables, yeah. Not surprising, closely linked to knowledge management. It'll be very important that you set up some sort of cloud storage and file sharing facility to share data, files, and deliverables between the partners. So at Lviv Polytechnic National University, it's pretty clear you're keen on, you're very adept at using Teams. From other projects, you might find they're using sort of SharePoint, Dropbox, Google Drive. There's various options. Wherever you have this cloud storage, it sounds all rather obvious, but it's a good idea to organize your folders according to work packages, maybe for meetings and so on and so forth. And really very proactively encourage partners to make use of that, store meeting minutes, consortium meeting presentations and so forth in those folders. Moving on to say some words about dissemination, communication, and exploitation. So the fact you're running a Horizon Europe project will have meant that you must have written you or your partners must have written a very compelling dissemination, communication, and exploitation plan in your proposal and now in your grant agreement. Now that you're running the project, how do you sort of go about kind of tracking things? Well, there's a sort of tracking you need to do on a sort of aggregate adding up level. And this table you see here is an example of that. And by the way, this table is again from this QRC for ESP project that I'm currently running. So yeah, you have your table. It'll indicate various project results, everything from project website to leaflets to video films, school visits, and journal publications, and more. Your table will also indicate what are your performance indicators, your key performance indicators. In this case, this table, it's the second to last column. So these are the sort of targets we have either by the end of the project or year by year during the project. And then the last column, it says period 1. This is because with my QRC for ESP project, it's a 3-year project, but we already had a review covering the first year. So our period 1 was year 1. And we needed to report, where do we stand with all these different dissemination, communication, exploitation measures. So in this last column, it shows what the totals were at the end of year 1. What I suggest is, if you're a coordinator or dissemination manager, is that you try to sort of keep such a table updated on a regular basis as you're going along. It just makes life a bit easier and less of a panic when you get to the periodic reviews. Now, that's the table sort of at this high aggregate level. It's also important to have some basic information on a sort of lower level of what's really been going on in this dissemination, communication, exploitation, what the different partners have been doing. So there, what I do suggest is create a simple Excel file. This is an example here. In the first column, have some different categories of events, outreach events, workshops, conferences, so on and so forth. And then with this Excel file, circulate it amongst the consortium partners every few months and ask them to update it and to give specific, in an ideal scenario, they'll not only say events that have already, say, recently passed, but they'll also give some details of events up and coming. And that could be interesting because if you're, say, managing a project website, you can start anticipating, we need to do a news article about such and such conference or such and such journal article that's coming up, yeah? So this next slide, this is just a continuation of this sort of Excel file showing the kinds of information that the partners were sort of putting into the file every few months. Okay, moving on now to talk about periodic reviews and about their occurrence, purpose, and reporting. So firstly, occurrence. Horizon Europe projects, which are of, say, 2 to 3 years in duration, will be divided into 2 periods, period 1 and a period 2. Projects of longer duration, for example, if they're 4 years or 5 years, quite often you see that, for example, maybe with healthcare related projects, they tend to have longer durations. But anyway, projects of maybe 4 years or certainly 5 years, they'll have additional periods. There might be a period 3. I think very occasionally, if it's a really long project, there might be a period 4 even. The purpose of these reviews with the Commission, well, there's several obvious reasons. I mean, firstly, it's about assessing the project progress. So during the review, the purpose is to evaluate whether the project is meeting its objectives, milestones, and deliverables as planned. It's about ensuring compliance. So the purpose is to verify adherence to Horizon Europe funding rules, ethical guidelines, and contractual obligations. It's about monitoring budget and resources. So, the review is about checking about financial expenditures and resource allocation to ensure efficient use of funds. It's about identifying risks and challenges. So that, the purpose is to detect any potential risks, delays, or deviations, and propose corrective actions if needed. And lastly, on this slide, the purpose is about facilitating communication. So the purpose is to provide an opportunity for beneficiaries and the European Commission to discuss findings, feedback, and future steps. Very, very much related to this subject about periodic reviews is the subject of reporting, and I'm going to be going quite deeply into some of this. From the perspective of reporting, and here I'm going to look at just the bits in bold on the left-hand side. You basically, from the reporting perspective, you've got three things to take care of. You've got, firstly, the technical report, what they call the Part A. You then have the technical report Part B, and then thirdly, you have what's called the financial report. Stepping through each of those. So the technical report Part A, this is comprised of online forms to be completed in Sigma. These forms will be things like a project summary, an update on status with regard to critical risks, the milestones we spoke about earlier on. You need to make sure they're up to date on whether they've been completed. Likewise, you need to be updated on publications. There's also forms about dissemination, which you need to fill in. The technical report Part B, this is where you're going to be spending the vast majority of your time preparing. So this technical report is also often referred to as the periodic management report. This report provides a comprehensive overview on project progress, so things like project objectives, achievements, deviations, impact, including scientific and innovation-related progress. This technical report provides explanations of work performed for each work package, the use of resources, risk management, and compliance with EC requirements, supported by deliverables and milestones. The financial report, as was already mentioned, at least in Module 2, if not already in Module 1, here we have to be careful because we have two types of sort of financial reporting. There's financial statements for what are called lump sum funded projects, and then there are financial statements for actual cost funded projects. So briefly, in the case of lump sum funded projects, it might seem a bit strange, but the financial statement doesn't require you to put any financial figures. Instead, you need to indicate a percentage of completion of a work package, because with these lump sum funded projects, the budget is broken down for each partner for each work package. So the Commission wants to hear, oh, how much has partner X completed work package 1? How much they completed work package 2, and so on and so forth. So that's what needs to be done there. This approach, significantly simplifies the financial reporting. On the other hand, for actual cost-funded projects, the financial statement provides a breakdown of the actual incurred costs, including personnel, travel, equipment, and subcontracting, ensuring that they align with the project's budget and Horizon Europe rules. Now, before I go on to the next slide, I want to bring your attention to the right-hand side of this slide. Basically, this is the cover of a PDF file that you can download from the Commission. And this is a document which explains what the Commission is expecting for each of these different reports, the Part A, the Part B, and the financial report. Using the QR code, you can download directly the PDF. The key thing, as mentioned so often with EU documents, make sure you have the latest version when you are about to do your periodic report. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and look at this technical report, the part B. A moment ago, I said, look, this is where you'll be spending the vast majority of your time preparing for the periodic review. On this slide and the next two slides, I apologize that the text and the images are rather small, but I've taken some actual pages from an actual technical report. I told you earlier on, in the recent past, I coordinated a project called Fit for NMP. So what I've done is I've actually taken pages from the period 1 management report. Not all the pages, because there's just simply too many, but I've taken a selection to give you a kind of an idea of how to go about preparing such a report. So stepping through each of these pages, the page on the left, this is the sort of page I have early on in that periodic technical report. It's a simple table. It shows the different work packages. It shows the objectives that we have for each of those work packages. And then in the right-hand column, it just says very briefly, where do we stand? Has that objective been completed yet, or is it ongoing? This table appears very early on in the report because you want to straight away give an idea to the reviewer, to the project officer, where do things stand? Yeah, it's an initial introduction. But not long after that, in the report, you'll have to go through each work package, giving sort of the current status. Now, in this middle page here, you see what was written about work package 1. The work package was entitled mapping. So going from the top of the page, what have I done? We first of all indicate what were the objectives. Those are copied and pasted from the grant agreement. Then below that, we've got sort of 4 bullet points highlighting the main achievements. So what have been the main achievements for work package 1 during period 1? This is again to make life as easy as possible for the project officer at the European Commission. He can get a quick idea what's been going on, what's the most interesting thing. Then below that, I've copied and pasted the table of performance indicators for work package 1, showing what the final target is, but where, and then obviously in the last column, what's the current total at the end of period 1. And then after that, we start this section, progress per task. So for each of the tasks that are described in the grant agreement, we indicate the title of the task, and then I would have invited the actual leader of that task to write, I would say, write 2 or 3 paragraphs summarizing what's been going on during period 1. And you see part of what was written in that case. Looking to the sort of screenshot of a page on the right-hand side, at the end of this work package 1, or it could be work package 2, whatever, I've then had a simple table where I've invited each of the consortium partners involved in that work package to write a few sentences, maybe a paragraph, saying how they specifically contributed to the work package during the period. Yeah. If you take that approach, that should put you in a good position. You know, that should please the project officer and the reviewers. Now, that's not the only thing you have to write about in these periodic technical report part B. And I'm now looking at the left-hand page on this slide. So you'll have a section 5, which says deviations from Annex 1 and Annex 2. A side note, I mean, the Commission is particularly sensitive, particularly keen, interested to know about any deviations, be it in budget or delays in submitting deliverables and milestones or whatever it is. Anyway, if you do have any such deviations, and it's quite normal to have some, maybe some delays in deliverables, here's where you need to sort of very concisely describe what those deviations are and give a brief justification. So in the case of Fit for NMP, in several of the work packages, we were a bit late in submitting our deliverables, but we did still manage to submit them, and we gave explanations which were deemed acceptable to the project officer and to the reviewers. Moving to the right-hand side of this slide, you can just about see near the top, it says 5.2 use of resources. So yeah, in this Part B technical report, you'll need to report on how many person months each partner has booked by the end of period 1. On the next slide, you'll see you also have to show the costs, in essence, the kind of financial statements. But firstly, about person months, or what the Commission calls efforts. So the thing to do here is put in a table like you see on this page. It shows each of the work packages, shows each of the consortium partners. There's a column for each consortium partner. But not only do you need to indicate what the amount of person months that have been booked by that each partner at the end of, say, of period 1 or period 2, you also need to have a row where you say, well, what was planned, what was anticipated, yeah? And of course, if there's a big discrepancy between those two, it's a deviation, you better explain it. So below the table, you'll see some simple bar charts I created, where, for example, the bar charts are in the middle of the page. It's talking about the efforts per work package at month 18. Obviously, a bar chart makes it easier to see discrepancies, deviations. If there are any, like we had here, I wrote nearly 20% more person months were booked to work package 1 than originally planned for period 1, but this was due to the consortium's efforts to identify and register talented newcomers early on in the project. I mean, in that particular instance, that was sufficient justification. The bar chart at the bottom, this is like efforts per partner. So kind of similar story, but sort of seeing, are there any particular partners who've overbooked or maybe underbooked at the end of period 1. Still in this technical report, still talking about resources. So looking at the page on the left and the page in the middle, this is basically a table which shows for each partner what their budget is for the projects, budget in terms of cost, but also person months. And then it shows what the actual costs are at the end of period 1. And this Excel file automatically also calculates what that means in terms of percentages. So you'll need to have a table like this or very similar in your periodic report, Part B. Again, it's a good idea. You see in the middle page at the bottom, I've done some simple bar chart to kind of show if there's been any deviations. And what did I write here? I said, actual other direct costs were low during period 1 due to reduced travel as a result of COVID-19 restrictions. So yes, our project was meant to have lots of events. And of course, because of COVID, we end up doing a lot of stuff online. And this meant our travel costs, which came under other direct costs, were low. So just a few words, that was enough, sufficient explanation. Anyway, even with your best efforts to present tables or showing the person months, the efforts, the costs, even with your best efforts to sort of explain any deviations, it's quite common for the project officer, for your reviewers to come back and ask for additional information. And this is what you see with this third page on the right-hand side. You can just about read it. It says at the top, responses to the European Commission's questions in the suspension of payment letter dated the 4th of October 2022. So it sounds rather dramatic, suspension of payment, but in essence, until you literally have every detail perfectly correct in the part B and the part A and your financial reports, you won't get your midterm payment or your final payment for the project. Yeah, it will be suspended is the official word. Yeah. Now in this case, why did we have a suspension? You can just about see two questions. The first question said European Commission's question to INT, so it was to intelligence in my company, and we were said, could you please explain the high deviation of the direct personnel cost declared as actual cost? Anyway, I wrote then, what, 2/3 of a page of justification. It did the job, yeah, and that was satisfactory for the Commission to accept, and we could move on. I mean, we had a second question to European Commission's question to LXI, that was Lux Innovation. The foreseen average personnel cost per month in the Annex 1 was lower than the one declared. Could you please explain it? So again, we gave her a response. Provided you give, detailed, feasible, reasonable explanations, you'll get through, yeah, and you'll get your midterm and or final payment. Now, so enough about periodic reviews. But well, no, not yet finished with periodic reviews. I talked at length about the part B. It's important to talk about the financial reporting, yeah. So this slide and the next 5-6 slides, it's going to go into more detail about that. So as mentioned before, financial reporting needs to be done at the end of each project period. Usually projects have 2 periods, period 1 and period 2, but they can have more periods in the case of projects of longer duration, e.g. 4 years or longer. Financial reports, these are online financial statements, must be submitted by the beneficiary, by the consortium partner, within 60 days of the project period. So let's, for argument's sake, let's imagine you had your project period 1 ended on the 31st of December 2024. You would have 60 days, 2 months, by which to make sure all the partners in the consortium have submitted their financial statements online. And in brackets, this can be a challenge, and it requires a lot of follow-up with partners. And we'll get into that in a moment. As mentioned before, there's a distinction between financial reporting for lump sum grants and actual cost grants. So in the case of lump sum funding, financial reporting involves indicating the work packages that have been completed in an online form on the European Commission's funding and tender portal, where in fact you indicate the percentage that has been done. Interim payments reimburse the eligible lump sum contributions claimed only for completed work packages implemented during the respective reporting periods. The European Commission has said that financial audits will not be conducted because actual costs are not reported in lump sum projects. However, the dedicated lump sum grant agreement still includes the option of financial audits like any other project under Horizon Europe. Lump sum beneficiaries are required to keep a so-called adequate level of records presented officially in contrast to the actual cost model requirements. So sorry, this is rather a lot of blah blah to say, even if you're doing lump sum funded projects, it's a good thing probably it's probably a good thing to keep some kind of timesheet reporting, certainly to keep some kind of records and notes to sort of clearly demonstrate that various researchers have worked on the project and what they were basically doing. For actual cost funding, so the financial reporting is done by also completing an online form on the European Commission's funding and tender portal. In this case, the interim payments reimburse the eligible actual costs claimed during the respective reporting periods. Now, what I'm showing you here is a screenshot from a Horizon. Just thinking, it was actually a Horizon 2020 project, this one, but it's not so different for Horizon Europe. Anyway, this is a financial statement that each partner would see at the end of the period. They would need to go through and fill in there's a column towards the right where it says total amount. Basically, they need to go through and for each of the different costs, like personnel costs, subcontracting costs, purchasing costs, they need to put in the actual numbers for the totals that were had at the end of the period. Not only do they need to put the numbers in, and here if you look on the extreme right, I've sort of got like this red kind of box and some red text. I've written here, important, remember to complete descriptions of costs where required. So yes, for example, for personnel costs, you'll need to indicate for your organization the number of person months that have been booked to each of the different work packages. That's information that you'll have to, and you'll give that information by clicking on, you can just about see in this red box, there's like a little icon with an R for reporting. You'll click on the one for personnel costs, that'll open a box where you can put in these numbers and these work packages. What other ones? I think I'll go into a bit more on the later slide, but just before I leave this slide, I again got one of these big yellow stars up at the top, and I've written here, email the partner's project financial signatories, in brackets PF sign, as soon as the project ends to request them to complete and submit their financial statements at least 2 weeks before the official deadline. So remember a moment ago I said there's this, whatever the deadline is for the project period, you have a further 60 days in which to submit the financial statements. In projects where I'm the coordinator or helping out in the administration, as soon as we've passed the dates for the end of the period, literally within a matter of days, I usually email each of the project partners, not so much the scientists, but this project financial signatory, the PF sign. That'll be the person from each partner who's responsible for filling in these forms and for electronically signing them. So I will email them to give them a nudge. And I'll also tell them, look, I won't say you got 60 days, because I know invariably there'll be some who won't do it within 60 days. No, I'll tell them a deadline, say after 45 days. So that if we get to the end of 45 days and they still haven't done it, I've got a good excuse to keep chasing them up and hopefully making sure they do all submit within the 60-day deadline. Some more about financial reporting. So this is well, I guess it's relevant for both lump sum and actual cost, but I'm going to say a few words about how costs are calculated. In the case of personnel costs, so the cost for each person, the way the Commission expects us to calculate it is to, say, take a daily rate multiplied by the days worked on the project. Now, of course, the question then becomes, well, what is the daily rate? So the daily rate is the actual annual personnel costs for that person. And when I say personnel costs, it's not just their gross salary, it also includes the cost that their employer will pay for, say, pension and social security. All that, say, over a year, divide that by 215 days. That then gives you the daily rate as the Commission would like us to use. Now, it's not only a daily rate that you need to be sort of thinking about. As you were seeing in what's already been mentioned about this technical report part B, there's tables we have to fill in where we say how many person months each partner's done. To get to person months, you're going to have to do some sort of conversion from hours. You know, people are working hours per week, per month. How do you do this conversion from hours to person months? So look, take whatever hours a researcher's done over the course of period 1, divide that number by 1,720, and then divide it again by 12. And that will give you your person month. So, sorry, to put it more simply, take the hours and divide it by 143.33. So this magic number, 143.33, this is sort of the standard number of productive hours that the Commission expects us to use for these projects for each month. So assuming you do all these calculations, yes, you'll need to indicate in the Part B technical report, but also in the financial reports, in the description, you'll have to put this information about person months. A few, but not too many, projects also have subcontracting costs. So in the case of subcontracting costs, indicate the name of the contractor, the service provided, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice, and reference the section in the Part B of the grant agreement where the project has subcontracting costs indicated. So what I've written there, this is an explanation, a reminder. If you have subcontracting costs in that online financial statement, in that R icon on the right-hand side where you have to give details, this is the information you need to give. If you don't give this, the Commission will definitely come back and ask you for it. Yeah. Purchase costs. Again, we're sort of thinking about what reporting needs to be done. Now, the thing here to remember is with purchase costs, you only need to provide a description if the total purchase costs exceed 15% of the total personnel costs. So the description is only required for the amount above this 15% limit. Now, so that hopefully, how to say, that might sound a bit abstract. Let's give a concrete example. Let's imagine you had total purchase costs for 16,000 euros and total personnel costs were 100,000 euros. Well, in that case, you would need to describe, give descriptions for purchase costs for at least 1,000 euros of those costs. Yeah, because obviously 15% of the 100,000 is 15,000, but you've actually got 16,000. So you've only gone over this 15% by 1,000 euros. That's not a bad thing. That's absolutely perfectly normal. It's just you need to, explain what the Commission is actually really trying to do here is, in quite a lot of cases, in many projects, the purchase costs are below 15%. So to save everybody's time and reporting and so on and so forth, the Commission is basically saying, look, below 15%, don't worry, we expect that. You don't need to report heavily on it. But with that said, let's assume you do have above 15%, then comes a bit the question, well, what of the costs exceeding the 15% should you report upon? Well, it might be travel and subsistence costs. If that's the case, in the description, make sure you indicate the names of the experts, the destination, the dates of the trip, the purpose of the trip, and reference the work package tasks to which the trip relates to. If, on the other hand, it's equipment costs, make sure that you indicate the name of the supplier, the name of the equipment, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice, indicate the amount of the depreciation of the reporting period, and reference the section in the Part B of the grant agreement, where it is indicated that the project would have equipment costs. If you do that, you'll be on safe ground. On the other hand, it might be other goods that come under purchase costs, which you want you're reporting above this 15% limit. So other goods, classic examples would be research consumables. In a project about OLEDs, no doubt you'll have chemicals, you'll have materials. Those costs will be reported in this area. If that's the case, in your description for those costs, make sure you indicate the name of the supplier, the name of the goods, the amount of the invoice, the date of the invoice. And by the way, with all these, where it says date of the invoice for all of these costs, make sure the date falls in the period that you're reporting upon. Don't indicate costs which fall before that project period or after that project period, because they would just simply be rejected. Okay. Lastly, works and services, catering. If that's the cost you're reporting on, indicate the name of the supplier, the name of the service, the amount of the invoice, and the date of the invoice, and reference the section in the Part B. Then the last thing it says here, other cost categories, e.g. internally invoiced goods and services. I'm struggling actually to think of cases where I've actually had this in a real project, but sometimes you have very large organizations and they do one division or department effectively sells a good or service to another division. And if that's the case, then this is where you can report those costs. But I would imagine for the vast majority of the projects, you're unlikely to see that. Still on this subject of financial reporting, the last slide on this. So I'm reading the first bullet point here. It says certificate on the financial statements in brackets CFS, i.e. audit certificate, is required at the end of the project for each beneficiary whose total eligible costs, in brackets direct costs plus indirect costs, exceed 430,000 euros. So yes, if you have a project and there is one or more partners where their actual costs at the end of the project exceed 430,000, then they're going to have to get a certificate on the financial statement. It's essentially an audit certificate. Now, and I'm reading the sub-bullet points here now. This certificate on the financial statement, it must be issued by a qualified auditor using the European Commission's template. It's essential to use their template. And the QR code on the right, that will take you directly to where you can download this template. If you do that, the template, it consists of the terms of reference, in brackets model for the agreement between the beneficiary and the auditing firm. And the template also comprises of the model for the certificate itself. So these are perhaps rather abstract, confusing words, but what we're basically saying is you've got to use the European Commission's audit certificate, use their text, their model, so forth. You can't allow the audit firm, the accounting firm, to use their own one. If you do, it will simply be rejected by the Commission. Okay. The auditor will indicate any irregularities and errors in their report. The EU Commission funding agency is responsible for deciding on the consequences of the errors indicated by the auditor. The CFS must be uploaded to the European Commission's funding and tender portal. So very, very quickly, going back a few slides, I showed you a screenshot of a financial statement. If this was, say, the financial statement for period 2 of a 3-year project, in other words, it was period 2 was the final period. If it was a project where a partner where they had costs where altogether exceeded 430,000 euros, automatically, it's not shown on this screen, but near the towards the top, there'll be like a box and a thing where you could upload a file. You would need to upload a scanned copy of the audit certificate, the terms of reference, and the actual audit certificate itself that have been done by the audit firm. That would need to be uploaded. And believe you me, unless you have exactly the right text, the commission will reject or continuously reject your costs until you get it right. At the top of my slide here, I've got another one of these big yellow stars. I wrote here 2 to 3 months before the official end of the project. Remind the partners with budgets exceeding 430,000 euros to contract an accounting firm to audit their financial statement as soon as the project ends. So yeah, look, I'm speaking from the point of view of as being a coordinator. What you don't want to do is to get to the official end of the project and then have partners only wake up and realize, oh, we're going to need a certificate on the financial statement. Oh, so we need to contract an auditor. You can see what happens in those cases. They never get the financial statement. They never get the certificate on the financial statement completed within the 60-day limit. They just, all the bureaucracy and so forth, it just doesn't happen. So to avoid that happening, you as coordinator, think ahead, be proactive, recognize which partners might need to have a CFS, and yeah, contact their PF signs and already a few months before and say, what are you doing about who's going to be your accountant, who's going to do your auditing, have you already booked them, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Last, I think related to project review. So not only do you have these 3 reports, you're also going to have to do some kind of review meeting. And these review meetings typically happen at sort of 2 months, 60 days after the official end of the period. The review is done by a European Commission project officer with the support of between 1 to 3 independent reviewers, independent experts, also known as reviewers. These project meetings, they used to be done, well, these days they're all done online. Before we had COVID-19, they were often held in Brussels. The European Commission project officer will usually ask you, the coordinator, to propose an agenda for a half day in the case of a coordination support action, or a full day in the case of a research and innovation action or innovation action. They'll expect an agenda either for a half day or a full day for the review. On the right-hand side, you see an example. This was from my Fit for NMP project. We had a review. We did it during an afternoon. Very simple. You see what we did was we stepped through each of the work packages. Each of the work package leaders presented for about 15, 20 minutes, and then they will say 5 minutes for discussion. Going back to the bullet points on the left, yeah, if you're the coordinator for the project, send out a standardized slide presentation template to all the work package leaders. We don't want is that they all have their own different styles. You come across as being not really a strong collaboration, rather less professional. So make sure, yeah, you have standardized slides that just make you look that much better. At the same time, remind your work package leaders that whatever they put in their slides, it needs to be consistent and coherent with what they wrote in the technical report, part B. Yeah. And then lastly, written here, make sure the consortium holds a practice dress rehearsal of the review meeting before the actual review. So a typical thing is a few days beforehand, before the actual review, you get your consultant together for an online meeting and you do a dress rehearsal, a pretend version of the review meeting, and you try to ask each other difficult questions. You try to give each other advice on how to improve their slides. Some words about budget flexibility. So when I'm doing running projects, time and time again, I get asked by partners, can they transfer budget between cost categories? For example, transfer budget from travel costs to personnel costs or vice versa. And the answers are, it depends. If it's a Horizon Europe actual cost funded project, the answer is yes. You can do this kind of transfer and you don't need a grant amendment, provided Article 5.5 of the grant agreement is respected. Note that one can make transfers between budget categories and between partners. Note that Article 5.4 refers to estimated budget. So at this point, look to the right of the slide. What I'm showing is these articles from a grant agreement. I mean, it's 5.5, the title is budget flexibility. So you can make, in the case of actual cost funded projects, you can make those transfers. You don't have to do an amendment, provided those conditions are met. On the other hand, for Horizon Europe lump sum, not some, but some funded projects, the answer is no, you can't do such transfers just like that. You would need to do a grant amendment. But wait a minute, if you're trying to do the transfer between, say, budget categories for the same partners, one partner saying, oh, I want to transfer money from travel to personnel costs, in a way that you don't even really need to ask the question because it's a lump sum funded project. Ergo, here's the money, provided you do the task, you meet the performance indicators, this is the money you've got to do that. How you actually use that money is kind of down to you, yeah? It's only if, for some reason, with a lump sum funded project, there's a real need to transfer budget from one partner to another. In those cases, you have to do a grant amendment. Which brings me on to my slides about grant amendments. So during Horizon Europe projects are running, it's not unusual to have to make amendments. The reasons are, it could be things like a change in the consortium composition, there may be an extension of the project duration, maybe there's a modification of the work plan, there may be budget and cost reallocation, you may have change of legal or financial status. Of all the, I mean, this is not an exhaustive list of reasons, but of the ones listed here, the first two are the most common that you're likely to encounter. So if we had a case of a withdrawing consortium partner, this is what you would need to do in practical terms. You would first of all initiate the request in the funding and tenders portal through Sigma. The coordinator or the withdrawing partner submits a termination request through the grant management system. They need to provide justification supporting documents, so the request must include a clear reason for termination of the partner, potential impacts on the project, and relevant supporting documents. You need to update the grant agreement and work plan, so the consortium must propose necessary amendments to redistribute the departing partner's remaining tasks and budget, ensuring project continuity. Assuming you've done all that, you'll need to get approval by the European Commission. The European Commission reviews the request, assessing risk and project viability before approving or rejecting the termination. And then lastly, assuming that all goes smoothly, you'll have formalization of the termination. If approved, the grant agreement is amended and the termination is officially recorded, including final cost claims and reporting for the withdrawing partner. So that's that common example. Another one, partners often ask for extensions. So it's a somewhat similar procedure. You initiate the amendment request in the funding and tenders portal. You need to provide a justification. In this case, the detailed explanation must be included in outlining the reasons for the extension. And I've written in here in brackets. So for e.g., there may have been delays in certain tasks, unforeseen circumstances, technical challenges. And this is the key thing. If you're asking for an extension, what I strongly recommend is that you specify that if you don't get this extension, there'll be a risk that the project cannot pass one or more of its milestones. That's really key that you do that. If you do that, it will significantly improve your chances of having the request for extension increased. Anyway, assuming you're given the justification, you then need to update the grant agreement and work plan. I've written here in bold. Even with all that said, even if you want an extension, best case usually is 6 months. The only time I've ever heard of more was when we had COVID and the commission then allowed 1 year, but otherwise you're lucky to get 6 months. Of course, if you make an extension, you need to have approval from your partners. After that, the European Commission will do a review of the online system, the request. Assuming that goes okay and they accept it, there'll be a formalization of the amendment. And if that's the case, then the grant agreement will need to be re-signed electronically and the new project timeline is officially recorded. So that's rather a lot of words and explanation about the execution and control phase. We just have this last closing phase at the end of the project. Here's a bit of a checklist of things you should think about here. Obviously, in the closing phase, make sure your final reporting and deliverables are all up to date. Submit the final technical and financial reports via Sigma. Ensure all deliverables and milestones are completed and documented. Final closure, so submit final cost claims and justifications of expenditures. Ensure compliance with eligibility rules and audit requirements. Review and assessment, so participate in the final project review with the European Commission and external evaluators. Address any feedback or additional requests from the European Commission. Dissemination, exploitation, finalize and publish project results, data sets, scientific publications. Ensure long-term sustainability and exploitation of project outcomes. Intellectual property and data management in this closing phase, so finalize, if necessary, any agreements on intellectual property rights and data sharing. Ensure compliance with open science and fair data principles. Archiving and record keeping. So you're obliged, it's written in the grant agreement, you need to maintain project records for at least 5 years following the end of the project, or well, check the grant agreement, maybe it's slightly less, but it's usually 5 years. Ensure availability of documents for potential audits or reviews. And then really last but not least, at the project closure, next step. So officially close the project in the funding tenders portal, Sigma. Plan any follow-up initiatives, collaboration funding applications. So it's often the case, you know, most, if not all, the consortium partners hopefully did a good job and gone on well, and they want to collaborate again. And who knows, maybe there's new funding calls. That's the time, you know, to prepare a new application. But as well as that, if you're the coordinator, what's good, and this goes back to module 1, where I said, you know, it's good to maintain a learning log on what went well, what didn't, and other advice for future projects. If you do that, month by month, year by year, you'll certainly get better at this whole activity of EU project management. So that takes me to my last slide and last homework, optional homework. So this homework is a bit different. What I got to really recognize is during all these 3 modules training, the one thing I've really not spoken much about is about generative AI and how that can support you with proposal writing and how it can support you with project administration. So for this last homework, I'm asking the following. The title is Generative AI in Proposal Writing and Project Administration for Horizon Europe. I'd like you, those of you who want to prepare a short report between 400 to 600 words covering the following 2 areas. So one is generative AI for proposal writing. Explain how AI tools such as ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot, and so on can assist in proposal writing. But at the same time, also identify key benefits, challenges, and ethical considerations that may be relating to that. Similarly, Number 2, generative AI for project administration. So describe how AI tools can support administrative tasks, and similarly also identify key benefits, challenges, and ethical considerations. Assuming you are going to do the homework, please, as before, send it to me at the following email address. Please send it the latest by the 9th of May. I'll then endeavour to go through and review it within the weeks after that, and give you some hopefully constructive criticism and feedback. So